What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion, Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined as always by Daniel Starkand. We have a special guest. Daniel, do you want to introduce your special guest to us tonight?
Yeah, I don't think we ever gave him a name, but this is my pal Broomy. I guess we could call him for tonight. We could call him Sweep Diego because the Dodgers just completed a nice little three-game sweep of the Padres. It was a fun one. I tweeted before the series started that it didn't really feel like it had as much buzz as the series they played earlier in the year, and that's just kind of because these are two teams heading in separate directions at the moment, and it honestly played out on the field kind of exactly how it should have, how I expected it to. The Dodgers, they came to play all three nights. The pitching especially was awesome, and they had just enough offense to pull it out. So fun series. We got bigger fish to fry now. We're looking up at the Giants. We don't really have to worry about the Padres now that they're I believe 14 games behind us or something
Yeah.
like that, something crazy. So yeah, just an overall fun series, and the boys are rolling right now.
16 of their last 18, the Dodgers have won. I believe it's 12 out of their last 13 as well. And that's the headline here, is that as funny as it seems, it doesn't feel like the Dodgers are fully clicking. Even tonight, they get Mookie Betts back, but it was an off night for Chris Taylor and Max Muncy and
Right.
Will Smith,
Let's
and yet 4-0 victory over the Padres. And we'll get into a lot because I do want to talk about kind of what happened to the Padres and what happened. I mean, it's just been a fascinating season for them, a team that everyone had high expectations for. They thought this year was going to be different, and yet it's not. But the storyline tonight is very, very simple, and that's Max Scherzer. This is a guy who's making his fifth start as a Dodger. He picks up his fourth win in those five starts, and absolutely dominant. 7 2/3, 2 hits, no earned run, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts, 104 pitches, struck out, just dominant against the middle of the lineup as well. Tatis 0 for 4, Cronenworth 0 for 3, Machado 1 for 4. The one was not off of him. Pham 0 for 4. And so just a dominant performance from him. Exactly what the Dodgers needed on a night like tonight. And, there's not much more you can say. Max Scherzer has lived up to the hype. He has lived up to the expectations for the Dodgers thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you just said, there's not a lot more we could say. I mean, this was his best start as a Dodger. He was in complete control all night, and honestly, it looked like the most life we've seen on his fastball. He was blowing it by guys,
Yep.
96, 97. And that's great to see because obviously, at this point in the season, you start to get a little worried as far as mileage goes for your starting pitchers. Scherzer, he's no spring chicken. He's getting up there. But I mean, his fastball looked as lively as ever. He pitched into the eighth inning, I think they said, for the first time since June.
Yeah.
So that was just an overhaul, just a brilliant outing. Only 2 hits allowed. 10 strikeouts. I mean, what can you say? All I got to say is that I'm glad he was in a blue uniform while doing it and not an ugly brown and yellow one. That for a while before the deadline, it looked like he was going to San Diego. So I'm just glad we got him. He's been worth everything and more. They've won every single game he's started. So, yeah, like you said, story of the night was Max Scherzer. He was just brilliant.
Yeah, Laura said must be tough for the Padres to watch him pitch, knowing what could have been. And
Yeah.
that's it. There was some pretty harsh but funny Dodger tweets out there today of, hey, I think it was Chad Moriyama, is sort of like, just like Padres fans expected, Max Scherzer walking off the mound in Petco after a dominant performance, just like brutal. While quote tweeting to Ken Rosenthal, Max Scherzer expected to be a Padre. So brutal
Right.
stuff for them, but just dominant stuff. Dodgers starting pitching in this series, 19 1/3, 0 earned runs. They did allow 1 unearned run, but and that's been the key. Obviously, with Scherzer, we're going to get to last night's game because we got enough time tonight to talk about the monstrosity that was last night's game. But Scherzer, 7 2/3, getting into the eighth inning, just needing one batter from Shane Green, and then Joe Kelly getting 3 outs. Kelly having only faced one batter last night. It was perfect. It played out exactly as Dave Roberts was hoping to. They didn't stress any of their big bullpen arms. Green was the only guy who pitched a full inning last night. He gets one batter today. Kelly got one batter last night, a full inning. So nobody taxed more than expected. Even Scherzer at 104 pitches was just right in line with kind of what you expected. So great stuff from him. Great stuff from the Dodgers. We'll get into it, but let's start with how this one started. It gets things kicked off for the Dodgers in the top of the third. Yu Darvish, really, really good. Perfect through the first 2 innings, just 24 pitches. And I'll admit, I watched the first 2 innings. Darvish was dominant. And I said, man, we got to work up the pitch count against this guy because knowing the bullpen situation on both teams after last night, you wanted to get into the bullpen as quickly as possible. Obviously, you want to get to Darvish as well. But then he gets to the bottom of the lineup. I texted my brother beforehand, Bellinger, McKinney, Barnes, Scherzer as your bottom four for a team that could be throwing out an all-star lineup every night. That is not all-star level stuff. And yet McKinney has a great at bat. And I want to talk about McKinney a little bit later. We'll talk about the decision to keep him over both Lux and Beatty. McKinney has a great at bat, gets 2 strikes on him, battles back, takes a walk. Next batter, Austin Barnes smashes a home run into left center field. Trey Turner and Corey Seager follow that up with back-to-back doubles. All of a sudden, it's 3-0 Dodgers. They get 35 pitches out of Darvish in the 3rd inning alone. Scherzer rolling 6 strikeouts through 3. The Dodgers add another one when A.J. Pollock triples on a knuckleball to Grisham. Bellinger sacrifice fly, 4-0 Dodgers. And that was about it. The only real threat the Padres had was in the bottom of the 5th. They put the first 2 runners on. Scherzer strikes out Ha-Sung Kim and then gets Victor Caratini into a double play. Great play by Justin Turner. Great turn by Trey Turner. That was kind of it. He threw 92 pitches through 7, comes back out, gets 2 more outs on 12 pitches. And, you know, it could have been worse. Pollock was robbed of a home run. Unbelievable catch by Trent Grisham in the 9th. Yeah. Would have been Pollock's 3rd hit of the game in addition to a triple and a single. But 4-0 Dodgers, really no threat whatsoever. Let me ask you this question. Is this more of a statement about the Dodgers pitching or the Padres hitting in your estimation?
I guess it's both. I definitely think the pitching deserves a lot of credit. Everyone who came out, it was awesome. I think the Padres had 10 hits the whole series, which is just
in basically 4 games when you factor in how many extra innings they played yesterday.
Yeah, and there was a span in yesterday's game where the Padres went almost 10 innings. I think it was 9.2 innings without a hit. So the Dodgers mixed in a no-hitter in there. But yeah, I mean, it was just a completely dominant performance. And I'd say the Padres hitting, they've been struggling for a while now. So I guess it says something about them too. But it's a tough break when you're coming in struggling and you got to face the guys you faced, with the Dodgers. And as great as they all are, they're all like different. So it's not like you're getting the same look. Like you're getting Julio in night 1, and then Buehler and Scherzer are 2 guys who are in the Cy Young contention right now. So just an overall dominant performance by the pitching. But yeah, there's no denying that the Padres, their lineup is not what it once was. We faced them earlier in the season, and it felt like every time Tatis stepped to the plate, he was going to hit a home run, or it felt like they were always just making stuff happen. But that's clearly not the team we see here today. And who knows, they might not even make the playoffs at this rate. It's going to take a lot of turning around on their part for them to even make a wild card game. They're now 2 games behind the Reds. So yeah, I mean, sucks for them, but that's why we play 162 of these things.
You hate to see it, right? Don't you just hate to see the Padres struggling?
Hate to see it.
There's people in the chat. We appreciate those joining us on YouTube. We appreciate those joining us on Twitter, Periscope, Facebook as well. Just saying that. I mean, the Padres look defeated. Jason says pure defeat on the face of Manny, Fernando Tatis, and Trent Grisham. And I mean, there was just a little bit of you could see the frustration. You could see just sort of the dejection of almost like they're watching their season slip away and they feel powerless to seeing it all happen. It's such a fascinating thing. I remember texting a friend at the beginning of the season. The Dodgers had that huge series against San Diego early on. It was like this hyped up series. It lived up to the hype. Unbelievable stuff. At that moment, we thought Dodgers-Padres was going to be the it series. Instead, obviously, the Giants have been the contender. And as you said, the Padres are now not favorites to make the playoffs. Like 2 or 3 days ago, you could get plus money on the Padres to make a wild card game. That number has gone up. It's probably 2-1 on the Padres to overtake the Reds and get into that postseason. It's just a fascinating thing because you look and it's still Yu Darvish on the mound. It's still Tatis. It's still Machado. It's still Cronenworth. It's still Pham. It's still all these guys at the middle of it. And yet such a disaster. Darvish over his last 7 starts had an ERA over 7. He was 0-5, up that to now 0-6. Over his last 8 starts, the ERA probably comes a tick down, although it wasn't a whole lot better from him tonight. And the Dodgers just keep on rolling. Again, it's such a fascinating thing because when I read the YouTube comments on a lot of our videos, it's these people, the Dodgers will never win the World Series. They've won 16 out of 18. Like, that's an unbelievable stretch. And a lot of these games, I rarely walk away thinking the Dodgers just played their best baseball. They're just finding ways to scrape together wins. That's what tonight felt like. Dominance from Scherzer, and they just scraped it together. They weren't great offensively. They just kind of got timely hits. And, the Dodgers only had 5 hits tonight. So it wasn't this unbelievable performance, only 2 walks. So not even a base runner an inning for the Dodgers. And yet 4-0, it's a big win.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean when you look at the way the Dodgers have been pitching, you don't have to score a ton to
Yeah.
win on most nights, and that's what we're seeing. The offense is kind of doing just enough, which is fine. I mean, ideally they would have scored more last night,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't have
Jeez
gone
Louise.
16 innings. Uh, but they're doing what they have to do, and the Padres. I don't know if you've seen their schedule, but it's not going to get any easier
No.
for them. They have one of the toughest schedules remaining. They still gotta come to Dodger Stadium for 6 games. They play the Giants 10 times still. So it's tough sledding for them, and it's not gonna get easier. So yeah, I mean, I feel like the Padres have never really been in contention for a full 162 game season. Like they really started to come on last year,
Yeah.
and that was a 60 game season. And they were already starting to fade kind of at the end of last year. They had injuries and such. So yeah, I guess they're finding out the hard way what it takes to get through one of these things to not only win a division but even just to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
They're I like I said, they're 2 games out of a wild card spot. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. It's definitely a nice little subplot of everything going on right now. But I'd say the main focus is still on the Dodgers. Like you said, they've won 16 out of 18. And just with all the talent on this roster, like you were saying, like there's so many different ways they could beat you. Like one night they hit 3 or 4 home runs. The next night they're hitting a few sac flies and moving runners over and such, and getting dominant pitching along the way. So yeah, things are good right now. Ideally, they'd be picking up more games on the Giants. It's not fun, going to play every night knowing the Giants have already won. But that'll change. And you can only control what you could control. So their job is to just go out there and win every day. And right now, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, you say it. The Dodgers remain 2.5 games back of the Giants. The Giants sweep the Mets. The Dodgers sweep the Padres. I love the guy in our mentions on Twitter who says, hey, as much as we want to be frustrated, think about how frustrating it might be for the Giants to sweep the Mets and not gain a single game on the Dodgers. So sometimes it's helpful to put yourselves in their shoes and say, you know what? They're probably just as frustrated as we are, which is a good
Yeah.
sign. Obviously, we're about to become Padres fans when the Padres, as you say, 10
Yeah.
games against the Giants. We're going to need
Yeah.
them to figure it out. So hopefully this is a blip on the radar, and hopefully they can light a fire a little bit and get those bats going for when they go play the Giants. Because if they could take 4 or 5 out of 10 against the Giants, that would be huge. And
Yep.
obviously they have the talent to do it. So let's get to this. Let's get to our MVP of the night. Probably a pretty straightforward one at the top spot. So maybe we can have some discussion about the number 2 spot. I don't think there's any doubt about who gets the number 1 spot, and that is Max Scherzer. 7 2/3, 2 hits, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts. Lowers his ERA on the season to just 2.51. I believe I read that was 6th in all of baseball, or maybe 6th in the National League. Just a dominant performance. 17 swinging strikes from him tonight, 18 called strikes. Unbelievable numbers. He gets 20 first pitch strikes. As you said, the fastball was lively, touching 97. Guys were swinging at sliders that weren't even close to the strike zone.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
was the thing. It's like, I realized as I was watching Scherzer what makes the elite guys so special. It's almost one of these chicken and the egg things. Once you become elite, there's this expectation. I think it was Tatis, first at bat of the game. It goes to a full count. With Scherzer, you just assume that he's about to throw a strike. There's not a chance in your mind you're thinking he's going to throw a ball. So even if it's close, you start to swing. The problem was that pitch was nowhere close. He ends up getting the strikeout just by being Scherzer. And you think, like, why are they swinging at these sliders that end up 3.5 feet down and off the plate? Well, the reason is because he's got a changeup that moves the opposite direction. He's got a fastball that moves the opposite direction. And so you start a ball in the outside corner. They don't want to stare at a changeup that ends up right in the middle of the plate. They end up swinging at sliders. So, I mean, there's nothing more that we can say. Scherzer clearly the MVP for this thing. Anything you want to add to the Scherzer note, or any other guys that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I feel like I've said all there is to say on Scherzer. I'm just thankful that we have him. Hopefully, they could get a deal done and he could stick around for a little while longer because, to be honest, I could get used to watching this every fifth day, and
Yeah.
I'm already getting used to it. I don't want it to end. So, yeah, he's the no doubt player of the game. I guess number 2 for me would be Austin Barnes. I mean, he took a great swing on a hanging slider by Darvish. Like you had previously said, Darvish looked pretty good up until that point. Like the Dodgers didn't have a hit before that. Austin Barnes hasn't been playing much as of late, which I will give some credit to Dave Roberts for that, because a lot
Yeah.
of the season that was a big complaint of ours, was Will Smith was not playing enough. And now that we're kind of down to the nitty gritty of things and the Dodgers need to basically win every single game, it's mostly been Will Smith behind
Yeah.
the plate, which is what I think everyone wants to see. He's putting up the numbers to back it up. But I mean, obviously coming off the 16 inning game last night, it made complete sense to get Barnes back there today, and he made the most of it. I mean, it's not every day, and your 8 hitter, your backup catcher, takes a guy like Yu Darvish deep, and that just kind of got the train moving. So that was huge. And honestly, right after he hit that home run, I was like, honestly, the way Max is
That's
throwing, like that's probably enough for tonight.
yeah.
Like Max was dialed in, so that was all the offense needed, and it was perfect.
Yeah, when they added a third in that inning after Scherzer gets out, and obviously he's on his stretch of on verge of setting the record for the most at bats in a regular season without getting a hit, which is funny as long as he keeps winning. But then Trey Turner doubles, Corey Seager doubles, and it's 3-0. And that was I had the same thought. I was like, well, this is good. Like Scherzer's going to be fine. Obviously, there may be some questions about the bullpen just because of the usage last night.
Right.
Nunez got brought up, and so what his usage would be and how much you could trust him. But yeah, it definitely felt like that. Folks on YouTube seems to be the same thing. Laura agrees. Scherzer number 1, Austin Barnes number 2. I'll give AJ Pollock a shout out number 3. Obviously he has that triple, which was hilarious because I watched and I think, man, what a terrible play by Grisham. Then they show the replay from behind home plate and Joe Davis kind of jokes like, hey, watch this thing knuckle. And that thing is like not flying in a straight line.
Yeah.
Grisham's a good center fielder. You see that at the end, but Grisham ends up getting him back, right? So it's like he gives Pollock the triple in one spot and then robs him of a home run later. But Pollock ends up 2 for 4, only guy with multi-hit game. Again, on the verge of 3 for 4 with a home run and a triple. So AJ Pollock, I mean, again, another guy that I feel like we talk about a lot, but an OPS that's creeping up towards 900. He's hitting 305. He's one of only like 6 or 7 guys in the National League hitting over 300. Pollock's been amazing. So obviously Barnes with the big swing. AJ Pollock deserves some credit as well. And there wasn't any defense needed. It wasn't like there were some great plays. Bellinger they had a couple plays in center field, got to some balls that looked impressive. But I mean, really, this was as boring of a 4-0 victory as humanly possible. There just wasn't a ton of excitement, not a ton of hits, not a ton of movement, but they get the job done.
Yeah, and I guess the one defensive play was that double play from Justin Turner to Trey Turner to McKinney. That was just a nice play all around. Got Max out of basically his only jam all night. But just real quick on AJ Pollock, we're talking player of the game. He's probably player of the series. It felt like he did something every night. He comes in the first game, makes a great catch, robs a homer, also had a 2-run single in that game, then comes back last night and hits the game-winning home run in the 16th inning or whatever it was. And then tonight, like you said, he had 2 more hits. And it easily could have been 3 if he's not robbed of a home run. So he's locked in right now. He's been they mentioned it on the broadcast, a bunch of times. He's been basically the best hitter in baseball since the beginning of July. He's been batting like 380 or 390 since that's time. So he's been incredible, and just goes to show like how long this Dodger lineup could be when he's hitting that well and he's still like in the bottom half of the lineup. Like that on any other team, that guy's batting like second or third for you just because of how hot he is. But with the Dodgers, they still like him down there, and it's perfect. He's started a lot of rallies as of late. And he's been arguably the team's best player over the last month or so, which is saying something considering how many, great players are on this team.
Yeah, and I've said it before. I mean, he doesn't have platoon split. So everybody that thinks that he's going to be the guy that sits out, it's like he's hitting 300 against both righties and lefties. So he has been on fire. Again, Dave Roberts is going to have a problem one day trying to fit all these pieces together. He had the 16-inning excuse last night, so today he gives some of those guys a day off. But in the days to come, you're going to see the full-fledged lineup, and they're going to have to decide what they do with Bellinger. When Bellinger gets a day off, and it's Mookie, and it's Taylor, and it's Pollock in the outfield, and it's Muncy, and it's Trey Turner, and it's Seager, and it's Justin Turner, and Will Smith, and you look down and you say, who bats eighth? Right? Who bats eighth in that spot? Probably Chris Taylor, who has been arguably the best player, one of the Dodgers' best players, obviously an all-star. And so it's good stuff for the Dodgers. A couple other storylines I wanted to touch on just while we're here, and we're going to get to last night's game because I think that was interesting and worth talking about. One minor move that maybe flew a little bit under the radar today was that the Dodgers had to option 2 guys in order to make room for Nunez and to reactivate Mookie Betts. They chose to send down both Matt Beatty and Gavin Lux. They choose to keep Billy McKinney on the roster. Now, the simple explanation, I think, is Billy McKinney could not be sent down to the minors. A DFA for
Right.
Billy McKinney means he becomes a free agent. Obviously, that's probably a headliner. But I actually wonder, is McKinney the best of those three guys? Like, is McKinney right now the guy that you trust the most out of those three? Or is this like, is this only because he would stay on the roster? Or do you think it's more than that?
Well, let me just start with Lux because I think he's the one who it makes the most sense for him to get option. Like since he's come back from the IL, he's only started like 2 games, I think. And for him, he's still a young player trying to find his career, to be honest. He obviously has the prospect pedigree, but it hasn't happened at the major league level to this point. And for him right now, I think the most important thing is just getting as many at bats as
Yeah.
possible. Like him being up here and sitting on the bench isn't really helping much, and he's not really he's not really a defensive guy, so it's not like he's like serves a huge purpose as a bench guy. Like you could bring him in late as a defensive
Yeah.
replacement or anything like that. Like he's not really that. So I think it makes sense for him to go down and get at bats. And who knows, maybe he gets hot in AAA and you call him back up in a couple weeks and he could come right in and contribute. So then it comes down to for the other one, I guess there would have been no other move that happened if it wasn't for a 16-inning game last night. Like they
Yeah.
needed an extra arm in Nunez, so I guess Beatty just became the kind of fall guy for that, and it makes sense just because he's a bench bat. Like he's not he's not starting too many games either. Like you said, McKinney. I think I trust McKinney more than him at this point, just because of the at bat quality
Yeah.
overall. A and B also the defense. I think Billy McKinney's a plus defender in right, and he played first base tonight, which is also a huge positive. Whereas you don't really think of Matt Beatty as really a defender. So I think outside of the option thing that you mentioned, like I still think it makes sense to keep McKinney around. They clearly like him. Like
Yeah.
he's not only been getting at bats, like he's been getting a lot of starts
Yeah.
over Beatty. Like it's this discussion we're having it now, but it's something they've been having for weeks
Yep.
because we've been like when Dave Roberts is going to pencil in that lineup on days when guys have off or guys are out or whatever. He's been deciding between McKinney and Beatty, and most of the time it's been McKinney that's in the lineup. So I think that makes sense as well. I think we'll see Beatty again. Who knows? Could be in a day or two. If one guy gets hurt or whatever, you never know. But I think as soon as a position player is being called up, it'll be Beatty. I just think this is more just someone had to go. We needed the extra arm after last night. But yeah, I definitely think Billy McKinney's been making an impression. I don't think he's been spectacular by any means. Like you could look up the numbers; they're not great. But
Yeah.
what he does, he gives you a strong defender, and he puts together quality at bats. He sees a lot of pitches, which is kind of the strategy of this team. We know that's what they like to do. They like to get pitch counts up, and he's been fine at doing that. I think that's the word I'd use to describe him. He's been fine.
Yeah, and I mean, you make the point. Like Billy McKinney has been playing over Matt Beatty, I think is what I was driving at. So there's this idea that, oh, well, they're just keeping McKinney because they'd lose him. Yes, that's definitely true. But even in a vacuum where both guys, either one could be playing and there's no consequences to benching the other, they have been choosing McKinney time and time again. And yes, you look at the 202 average and you say, hey, that's not necessarily what we're looking for here. That's not all that exciting. But the thing is as you said, he is drawing walks. He is putting together competent at bats. And that I would say that first one, he gets 2 strikes, but he stays with it and ends up working the walk, scoring a run. The on base percentage, 318. I mean, it's not terrible. That's palatable. Like obviously the slugging percentage is terrible. It's sub 300, but he gets the big hit last night, breaking the first run of the game, of the extra innings in the 15th inning. Of course, it ends up not mattering, but he hit the ball hard a few times today. And so I don't know. I mean, I guess McKinney is the beneficiary of a few things. One is we've seen the low bar of expectations that some of these guys coming up from the minors, and he doesn't look overmatched. Now, it's not like he looks great, but clearly the Dodgers see something in him, and maybe it's the defense, maybe it's the versatility, maybe it's the at-bat quality. But I just thought it was interesting and telling that they chose him over Beatty and over Lux. And again, over McKinstry is another guy who's not currently on the roster. By all accounts, is healthy. I don't know if he's down at AAA. He was on the taxi squad for a little while, but McKinney is beating these guys out. And again, just to be clear, obviously the fact that he can't be sent down to the minors plays a part in this. But I also think if they thought there was a gap between Beatty and McKinney, I don't think they'd have an issue letting McKinney go. I don't think they see him as this future long-term guy that they need to somehow hang on to. I think he
Right.
fills a need. He's a plus defender, as you said. He's definitely and again, I mean, he might be average, but that would be better than what McKinstry and Beatty give you out in right field.
Right.
Obviously, Beatty can play some first base, but McKinney, looked pretty competent there tonight. And so definitely good stuff there. Let's get to some questions before we get to last night. This is a big one. Laura asks, is Cody Bellinger going to get benched? And I kind of hinted at this a minute ago. The team is now fully healthy offensively. There's a potential for Muncy, Turner, Seager, Turner as your infield, Will Smith as your catcher. You've got Mookie Betts in right field, and then you've got to decide between Chris Taylor, AJ Pollock, and Cody Bellinger. We just talked about how good AJ Pollock is. We've talked about the quality of at bat and how good Chris Taylor has been.
Yeah.
Can you think of a single reason why, if the Dodgers needed to win one game, that Cody Bellinger would be in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the reason would be his defense. I guess, like, I think it's still clear that he's the best center fielder, but is that reason enough? Like,
Yeah.
to me, no. Like, it's not like Chris Taylor's a bad defensive center fielder. Like, he's just fine out there.
Yeah.
Obviously, Pollock's fine in left, and Mookie's great in right, so they'd still be fine defensively. But I think I think they're gonna rotate guys pretty much. Like
Yeah.
everyone's gonna get a day off here and there, and who knows? Like we talk about how everyone's healthy now, but we'll see how long that lasts. Like that hasn't been the case
Yeah.
hardly at all the entire season. So we'll see how long that lasts. But yeah, I definitely think if there was, a must-win game right now and you're filling out a lineup and you have everyone's healthy, I think, Cody might, yeah, he could be the odd man out because if you look at, the other options, they're all pretty much no-brainers. Like, yeah, that guy should be in the lineup. And Cody's the only guy that, in theory, yes, he should be in the lineup just because of his name brand and because of the defense, like I was talking about. But at a certain point, you got to start producing at least
Yeah.
some. And it's been the same thing with Cody all year, where there might be a period where he hits a couple home runs and it looks like he's coming out of it. But we sit here and say, we got to see more of it. We got to see more of it. And every time, the more ends up being another slump.
Yeah.
So, he's running out of time here. I've been saying all season, like, oh, he'll figure it out eventually. He's got plenty of time. Well, that's no longer the case. It's the end of August. We're 2.5 back. We need to win just about every game the way the Giants are playing. So I definitely think we're going to see his playing time decrease, especially it's probably going to be a platoon situation where he's definitely not playing against lefties.
Yeah.
And probably not all righties as well. So I guess we can only hope that the team stays healthy and Dave Roberts has those
Yeah.
difficult decisions to make.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't really had to at all. But I guess we'll see how it goes, because right now I think he's pretty clearly the odd man out.
Yeah, I mean, and looking defensively, Pollock is clearly the worst defensive outfielder that the Dodgers have. And Pollock's fine. Like I would say probably average.
Yeah.
And the offense is so good. I mean, we're talking one of the best hitters in baseball right now. Top 25 to 30 hitters in all of baseball, the way he's swinging the bat right now. So there's no chance he's coming out. And let me ask you this question. If Cody Bellinger is a 10 out of 10 defensively in center field, what's Chris Taylor? Like a 7? 7.5? I mean, he's
I was going to say 7, yeah.
Like he's above average out there. He clearly has
Right.
the speed. And not to mention, obviously, you could put Mookie in center field. You might not want to mess with his hip, but like Chris Taylor can play a more than competent center field. And so when you think about how often does a guy defensively change the complexion of a game from center field? It definitely happens. But to try and weigh that out over 4 at-bats, and the gap between Cody Bellinger on a scale of 1 to 10 offensively is a 1, a 2, just maybe a 2 just for the sake that he could potentially hit a home run. And Chris Taylor, who's been slumping, is still probably a 5 or a 6, and on a good day is closer to a 7.5 or an 8. So like
Right.
I just think the gap offensively is so big. I think Pollock is the big one. I think Pollock is the guy that, because of how he's hitting, it's made it so that Dave Roberts doesn't have a choice. I think Dave, and I agree with you completely, by the way, that over the course of the regular season, they've got 4 guys in the outfield that they can rotate, and they can move those guys in, right? Cody Bellinger can take some games at first base. Obviously, Mookie Betts could play some games at second base. Chris Taylor could play at shortstop. Like, there's ways. Pollock is really the only guy that's stuck in one spot, and Justin Turner at short. Like, or at third, Corey Seager at short. Other than that, all those guys are kind of flexible to move around. But I would also add that if we're talking about moving guys around, would you rather have Albert Pujols in the lineup or Cody Bellinger in the lineup right now? Because if we're talking about, and I think maybe you and I talked about this, or maybe it was Matt, but we were talking about like, well, the platoon splits aren't perfect because Pujols hits lefties and Bellinger would hit righties. But I mean, I don't know. Against a righty, would you take Pujols over Bellinger right now if you just needed a hit? Like, I might, so I just think even when you get past the 8 guys, I'm not even sure Bellinger is the obvious ninth guy offensively for the Dodgers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you said it. I agree. Right now, there's no really argument against that at this point. I mean, the
Yeah.
numbers, they don't lie. We've been watching it for a while now. It's not like for early on there was the excuse like, oh, he's just coming back from injury, like blah blah blah. Let him find his rhythm or whatever. But now he's been playing half the season or whatever. So he's running out of time. And I guess I mentioned earlier the topic of defensive replacements. I guess that
Yeah.
guy is not a bad guy to have as a
Yeah.
defensive replacement late in a game. Like if you're up late in a game and you could bring in Cody Bellinger to play center field, it's not a bad weapon to have right there.
Yeah, and Taylor says Cody's defense in the playoffs is a game changer, and we've seen that. Do you think there's something to that? Does the value of defense change once we get to the postseason? I mean, it's kind of the same Austin Barnes argument, right? Whereas there's a gap between the guy who's most valuable to you in the regular season and the guy who maybe is slightly more valuable in the playoffs. Is that a valid sort of thing to think about? Like, does his ability to play center field increase in value to the Dodgers once the playoffs start?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I guess it depends on how other guys are hitting. Like if you have a lineup where the top 6 guys are all stars and mashing the way the Dodgers could potentially have, then maybe you say, yeah, like we want our defensive center fielder. But I'd say just as much as the value in defense goes up in the postseason, like the value in offense and
Yeah.
every single at bat, like that goes up just as much. Like obviously, if you got a guy in there who's could hit a homer at any time or whatever, like that's just as valuable as a guy who could go out there and play great center field. So I think the value in everything in the playoffs is just higher. And you got to kind of weigh the pros and cons of which you want to go with on that particular night.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fair point. And again, I mean the Austin Barnes comparison to me is kind of the interesting one, just because it does feel like hey, there is this weird thing that happens once the postseason comes around. And I mean, I will say to Bellinger's credit, he had the biggest hit of the postseason last year. His
Yeah.
home run to win an LCS Game 7 was the single biggest hit that the Dodgers had. Obviously, Will Smith had a big home run. Game 5, I believe, Mookie Betts a couple home runs. But it was Bellinger's home run in Game 7 that was the biggest, not the hugest. But for them, like that is one thing working in his favor, is that they have seen him do it. I don't think the moment is going to be too big for him in the playoffs. The flip side is a lot of these guys start to struggle offensively in the playoffs because pitchers know exactly where to pitch them, and they've seen these guys over and over and over again. So we've seen situations where both Bellinger and Seager in the postseason have had rough stretches. Obviously, Seager had no issues last year. But
Yeah.
with a guy like Bellinger, if you're scouting him and playing him every single day and you see the holes in his swing that he has, I wonder if that's even more magnified offensively in the postseason. So it's kind of a balancing act. Again, I think if Pollock is playing the way that he is, I think if Chris Taylor rebounds, which seems far more likely than Cody Bellinger rebounding, then I think these are going to be pretty easy decisions for Dave Roberts once you start penciling in basically the same lineup in the postseason. Let's see. If anybody else has some more questions, go ahead and throw those in the chat. Again, we appreciate those joining us on YouTube, on Facebook. James is over on Facebook. We appreciate the folks joining us on Twitter and Periscope as well. This is a good question. It's one you and I have talked about, and maybe it's worth, on a night like tonight, it's worth re-asking. Jeffrey Horn asks, Bueller or Scherzer in a one-game wild card?
Scherzer, I mean, I've said Bueller all along, but Scherzer's making it awfully tough the way he's been pitching. I still think I go Bueller. We've seen it time and time again with him. Like the bigger the game, the better performance we get from him. There's no one I trust more than him in a big game situation like that. So I'm still going him. But yeah, honestly, you can't go wrong either way. Like we saw what Max Scherzer did tonight and has done ever since coming over to the Dodgers, which was just a continuation of what he was doing in
Yeah.
DC. Like he's been doing this for years now, so you can't go wrong either way. I'm cool with either, and you could even throw Julio in that same discussion, and you feel just as good about it. Like we know he's got he in the big games he comes up big too. Obviously, I'm still going Bueller or Scherzer over him. But if it came, let's say it came down to that, and that it was his turn in the rotation, and you were fighting for a division race all the way up until the end, and you ended up having to throw Julio in the wild card game, like I'd feel really good about that as well.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think obviously we're both agreeing that Julio is a step below those other two guys, but just having seen him in big moments obviously is huge. And to your credit, I mean, I think this is where the advantage of Buehler and Scherzer comes in because let's say it's the last day of the season and the Dodgers are tied with the Giants or they're a game back of the Giants. The beauty of for them to being able to pitch Scherzer or Buehler in that game and knowing that it's not
Right.
going to cost them sacrificing somebody for the wild card is huge. And especially with the spacing of games, that probably wouldn't cost them a whole lot, even into the NLDS if they needed it. Same thing. I think that's where I would probably say maybe Julio goes in that game. Now, there's very little you can do to mess with the sequencing. Obviously,
Right.
you pitch who's going to pitch, but I think it's a tough one. I mean, on a night like tonight, it's kind of crazy to think, hey, the guy that, is one of the best pitchers of his generation, either him or Kershaw, who's a 3-time Cy Young Award winner, who, has been one of the best 5 pitchers in baseball for the last 7 or 8 years. Yeah, I'm not going to take him in a one game, the 7 2/3, 10 strikeouts, 2 hits. But, I mean, Buehler is literally the favorite for the Cy Young right now and
Yeah.
has been the best big game pitcher in baseball for the last 3 or 4 years. So you combine that, I think I'm with you on Buehler. Okay, a couple more questions. This is a good one. Jonathan Robinson. I say good one. This might hurt you to answer. Trey Turner or Corey Seager? Who do you want?
Long term.
Both is not an answer for you here, Daniel.
We're talking
Yeah, who do you
who
extend? If
signs the long
you
term.
sort of Friedman has in his mind, I can only extend one of these guys. Because
Mhm.
theoretically, right, even though Trey Turner has one more year left, I would imagine that what they're doing is negotiating with both guys this
Yeah.
offseason. They're not going to let Trey Turner hit free agency and then Corey Seager be gone. So
Right.
if you had to choose between extending Corey Seager or Trey Turner, in theory, to be
Yeah.
your shortstop of the future, the president of the Corey Seager fan club, who are you
Yeah.
choosing?
No, you're right that this is a tough one for me. But I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna say it quick. Trey Turner.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing, everything I've seen from him. And again, we know what Seager is capable of. The guy was the World Series MVP last year, after all. Turner's been amazing. I mean, it's hilarious. I feel bad saying this for Padre fans. It's been hilarious to watch this series play out because you look
Mhm.
at the guys that the Padres have added, and every single one of them, it's like, oh man, Frazier's gotten way worse ever since he came to San Diego. Like all these guys where it's like, oh, they
Yeah.
traded for this guy and he's been terrible. Like
Oh,
Hudson, I think too. Was he the other one who's been terrible?
yeah.
Like it's like
Yeah.
all these guys, and then it's like, I don't know, like Trey Turner's hitting like 400 and Max Scherzer's 5-0 in 6 starts, and the Dodgers won the 6th. So it has been funny, but yeah, it's a fascinating conversation. Obviously, Trey Turner, a little bit better health on his side,
Yeah.
better
That's what I was.
defensively.
That's what I was gonna say. That when you factor in the health, the fact that Turner could play shortstop long term, like I still think Corey Seager ultimately will have to move to either third or first. You factor in the speed,
Yeah.
that's something that lasts a while. So I just think Turner's probably a better bet to give you more bang for your buck on a long term deal like that. But I love both guys, and I hope the Dodgers don't have to make that decision, and I hope that they could keep them both because that's the making of a special infield and special team right there. Those two guys are both game changing players.
Yeah, if you're the praying type, you just need to pray that Corey Seager accepts in his heart that he's a third baseman long term, that Justin
Sure.
Turner becomes the DH next year, Corey Seager becomes your third baseman of the future, Trey Turner is your shortstop of the future, and we just move on with there. But
Yeah.
there are no indications that Corey Seager is going to be interested or happy with that. Jason Austin asks, not to focus too much on the Padres, how long into the offseason until Tingler is fired? If they don't make the wild card, I would say 15% chance he keeps his job. I just don't know. The fact that they fired the pitching coach, a guy that everybody liked and respected, tells
Yeah.
me that the seat is getting warm, that there's heat
Yeah.
there, and that maybe he had a call from his boss saying, hey, if this doesn't get fixed, then you're next. And that was why
Right.
he made that move, because this is a Hail Mary type. I just don't know how you run it back with this guy having not really won anything with an unbelievable talented roster in front of him that for seemingly no reason has completely fallen apart.
Yeah, yeah, and we know AJ Preller is a very, emotional, reactionary type of executive. He went out and made all the moves in the world, and if they miss the playoffs altogether, like not even make a wild card game, that would be, I'd say that's a pretty disappointing season. So, yeah, I'd have a hard time seeing him, keeping his job after that. Obviously, Preller is not going to fire himself, so someone's got to be the scapegoat. You could only make so many moves, and he's probably going to make just as many, next off season. But yeah, if the Padres don't make the playoffs altogether, I'd imagine they'll probably make a change there.
Okay, next question here. This is a thing that we've talked about in the past, less lately. Just call me Kai. Ask, what are your thoughts on Mookie not batting leadoff anymore? It feels like an obvious decision because Trey Turner is, you could argue maybe the best leadoff hitter in all of baseball.
Right.
Plus Mookie's hip stuff going on. This feels like a
Exactly.
no-brainer, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Trey Turner, you want that speed at the top, and right now, Mookie could still be getting it done with the bat, but I don't think we're expecting him to be his full self, on the base pass necessarily. So I think he's better suited for the middle of the lineup right now, at least while the hip is still a thing. And honestly, with this lineup, it's not like it really matters
Yeah.
that much. Like you could order them however you want, and they're still gonna produce like with those names that are in there.
If both guys were fully healthy, would you prefer to have Trey up top still?
Probably, yeah, just because he's the fastest guy. Like that's the guy you want at the top. And that's for me, that's how it's always been. Like you want your fastest guy at the top. I'd probably though, if everyone's healthy, I'd probably put Mookie right behind
Yeah.
him second. And then Muncy third, and then go from there or whatever. But I like the fastest guy at the top, because that could just change a game. Like if he
Yeah.
walks to lead off a game, like he's already in scoring position, pretty much. And then next thing you know, one hit or a couple, productive outs, and you're up 1-0.
Totally.
I just like what he brings to the table up there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I'd have Mookie batting second and just figure it out from there. And some people in there, I think, Nomo FOMO are saying Mookie leads off once he's comfortable again, I think, which is, fair. Who knows? HG, I think this is a quick one. Is Kershaw really injured, or is this a wink, wink, take time off not to overtax him before the playoffs? I can assure you if this was wink, wink, he'd be back by
Yeah,
now.
no.
The
Yeah.
Dodgers, in case you didn't know, are 2.5 games back in the division. They need every win. They've got 2 bullpen games probably coming up in the next 3 days. So, unfortunately, it's not wink, wink. There was good news yesterday that he had a bullpen session, that he's feeling pretty good. So there is some more optimism that he could come back and be built up to possibly make a couple starts. That's sort of the everything goes right. He probably makes 2 starts before the postseason, and you see what you have. And if not, then maybe he stays at sort of a reliever's length. And, between Scherzer, Buehler, and Urias, you're doing okay with 1 through 3. You only need a 4th starter every once in a while, and David Price or Tony Gonsolin, if he's back, one of those guys could fill that role as well. So definitely think Kershaw is really injured there. External Void asks, Albert Pujols getting re-signed next year. What do you think?
I think there's a good chance of it. I mean, every time they show the guy in the dugout, he's smiling from year to year. He certainly looks like he's having fun. This is a good place where he could kind of prolong his career. Obviously, he's no longer an everyday player at this point, but with the DH coming
Yep.
to the NL next year, that's the assumption that would open up some more at bats for him. He's chasing 700 homers, so I don't think retirement's an option. He needs like 23 more or whatever it is at this point. So yeah, I definitely think it's a possibility, and I'd love to see it happen. I mean, he's been everything we could have hoped for and more at this point. So yeah, I'd love to have Albert back for one more year and have him, go for 700 in a Dodger uniform.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing that says that this guy couldn't do the exact same thing offensively for the Dodgers a year from
Right.
now. Obviously, the speed is already gone. I mean, like it's not like he's going to
It
get
was never
slower and
there
that's
in
going to
the
be a
first place.
dramatic. Yeah, exactly. It's not like the speed is going to become more of a problem. It is maxed out the problem level speed that he has. But yeah, with the designated hitter coming back, I mean, he still plays a fairly competent first base, so it's not like he's completely useless in the field. You just don't want him there every day. He's more of a platoon guy against lefties, and so yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Justin Turner, as we've seen, is not completely toast as a defender. He's not what he
Right.
used to be, but you could absolutely have those two guys kind of in a platoon of sorts as the designated hitter, where Pujols DHs against lefties, Turner DHs against righties, and then you mix and match the Luxes and the McKinstries and of the world in at third base and whatnot. So definitely agree that. And again, like, what is his alternative? Like, if that's your role, I wonder, does he really even want to play every day? Like, he probably has to feel in his body that he can't. And if you're not going to play every day, I can't imagine there's a better situation for him out there than the
Well,
Dodgers.
yeah, and the thing is, if like where at this point, where can he even play every day?
Yeah,
Like it's only gonna be on like a really bad team, and what's he
totally.
what's he gonna sign with the Pirates? Like no
Yeah,
way.
yeah. Joey Yarborough asks, do you think the Giants can maintain this pace? The second question, how many more head-to-head games do we have with them? Just 3. So the question is, The Dodgers are currently winning about 63% of their games. I believe the Giants are 64 or 65% of their games. Do you think their winning percentage stays the same that it is right now through the end of the year?
I mean, we've been getting this question all season pretty much, and all season I've been saying no, like
Yeah.
they're gonna come back down to earth at some point, but they haven't. So and we're at the point where it's like I can't just assume that's gonna happen. Like
Yeah.
they've been crushing everyone. So like you said, the Dodgers have 3 more games against them. Those are gonna be really important because as we've seen, we can't count on other teams to do the job for us. Like we're gonna have to do it ourselves. Like we're 2.5 back right now. Obviously we'll see where we're at going into that series, but we're in a spot right now where, if we just keep winning and then win that series or even sweep that series, like we'll be in a spot to pass them, and that's really all you could ask for because right now, I mean, they're playing great baseball. You got to give them credit. Like as much as I hate the Giants, like they've been doing it all year. It's honestly been really impressive.
Yeah, I was just trying to do the math of they've got 35 games left, which means they would win 23 of 35 and go 23 and 12. The Dodgers have 34 games left, so in order to make up the 2.5 games, if the Padres were to win 23 games, the Dodgers then would have to win 26
20,
games.
yeah,
So you do the math on 26 and 8. I mean, the Dodgers are on that pace right now. Obviously, they have
yeah.
3 games against one another, so that's where your money is. If you could take at least 2 out of 3, if not a sweep there, then that's the big one. Nomo FOMO asks, how much longer can our bullpen keep this up? We don't want to exhaust these arms before October. I mean, I've said it all along. I think a lot of this, what you see, is the real deal. I think Jansen is looking good. I think Trinan is looking good. Obviously, if Joe Kelly comes back, that's a big boost. Corey Knebel has struggled, admittedly, but on the whole has been good, and you have confidence that he'll be able to figure it out over the last month and a half of the season. And then, I mean, Vesia, it doesn't appear is going anywhere. Bickford does not appear to be going anywhere.
No.
Brusdar Gratterall has been as good as he has been of late. And so you just keep tacking. I mean, Shane Green has been terrible this year, but I mean, look, the Dodgers have reclaimed far worse than Shane Green, who was like
Yeah.
an all-star closer 2 years ago. So
Yeah.
you keep stacking these guys up. Danny Duffy is due back at some time. Tony Gonsolin is due back at some time. If Clayton Kershaw comes back as a reliever, if David Price is back in the bullpen, I mean,
Yeah.
you just stack these guys up. I don't see any reason why the bullpen can. Now, the pace that they've done the last 3 games, I mean, the Padres made them
Sure.
look like an all-star level bullpen, okay? They're not going to throw 10 innings of no-hit baseball like they have been against the Padres, but I think they're very, very good. I don't see anybody in that group where I'm like, oh man, this is a complete facade.
Yeah, yeah, I agree completely. I mean, and what you're seeing is it's not like it's the same 2 or 3 guys every night. Then that's when you get a little concerned. Like, all right, these guys, they're pitching back to backs, like they're throwing 3 and 4 nights, like these guys are doing it every night. That hasn't really been the case. I think the Dodgers have done a good job of giving guys the adequate amount of rest. Like you don't see guys going on back to backs a lot, or if they go 2 days in a row, you don't see them going a third day. So I think the Dodgers have done really well there. I think we've seen a record number of pitchers used this year in the organization. Like
Yeah.
they've cycled in new arms when they need it. Like they've shown they could do that.
Justin
So I think
Brule.
yeah, exactly. Our friend Connor Green didn't last too long, unfortunately. But I think that's what we're seeing, and I think the key is it's just health. Like those
Yeah.
guys, they need to stay healthy. Some guys have been in and out of the mix. Some guys have been in there all year and they've been great. So they just need to continue that. But like you said, I don't think they're gonna keep up what they've done over the last week or whatever, where they've been, lights out. But they've been one of the best bullpens in baseball all season. So I don't, expect that to change,
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. Taylor does want to point out that Albert Pujols' speed was on display in that rundown against the Mets, and so we should be giving Albert Pujols
That's true.
some credit for athleticism there.
True.
Jason
That was
throws out a similar question. I'll ask you, Daniel. You running backwards, Albert running forwards. Who's faster?
Honestly, if I'm running backwards, there's a good chance I fall to the ground.
Yeah, we're talking
but if
like
that-
you have to get from home plate to first base. If you fall, you've got to get back up. Do you beat Albert
Yeah.
Pujols running backwards?
So I'm a give it to him just because of the chance that I fall, and if I'm trying to go as fast as I can, there's a good chance I end up on the ground. But if not, it might be close. I don't know. I think Albert could still run a little bit. he's not an old man in a wheelchair out there, but obviously he's not the
He's
fastest
about
guy.
as close as you'll see to an old man in a wheelchair ever in your life. I mean, he's got to be the slowest guy like ever in Major League history, right? Like, I mean, they've got stats on sprint speed and stuff. I mean, and like a guy's running full speed, like guys actually trying to run down the line. I'm not talking about like pitchers that take three
I'll give
steps.
you a good race. I'll give you a good race, and we just saw the
Oh,
matchup the other day. It was two of the oldest guys to ever face each other. But who wins in a race, Albert Pujols or Rich Hill?
I've got Rich Hill by 10 feet. I've got Rich Hill by 10 feet
Okay.
because he is going to be 100% effort. He's like a die trying kind of guy. I thought you were going to say like Bartolo Colon might be the other one in contention. The thing that hurts Pujols is how terrible he looks as a runner. Like it's like
Yeah.
he just looks so awkward running, which doesn't help. And again, he is like legitimately old for a Major League Baseball player. So like, I mean, I will probably look worse as a 43-year-old or whatever he is running the bases. So, there you go. Albert running, Daniel crawling. Andrew wants to know, you crawling versus Albert running. Do you feel, is that faster
That'd be
than your
close.
back pedal?
That'd be close.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. One other question here, and this is the perfect transition. The last 10 minutes we could talk about last night. Andrew asks, do you think MLB should keep the new extra innings rule for next season? Obviously, everything indicates that they will not keep it, but I'm going to go out on a limb here. I like the extra inning rule in general. I think it makes it more exciting. I think 16 inning games are terrible. I want nothing to do with 16 inning games, and it does everything in its power to prevent them. Think about how long last night's game would have taken if there were not a runner starting at second base. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't hit with a guy. They couldn't score a guy from second. It would have been even more miserable without it. That was the only thing keeping that game with the pulse. I know I'm very much in the minority there. I just don't like really long extra inning games. I think it's bad for bullpens. I think it's bad for teams in contention. So personally, if it were up to me, and this has nothing to do with last night's game because we're going to talk about that in a minute, I actually like the extra innings rule.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess I'm kind of torn. Like I see both sides. Like I definitely agree with you. I don't enjoy watching 18, 19 inning games either. Like I want those things done as quick as possible. Especially in the regular season when you play 162. Like let's get on to the next one. We got another one of these things tomorrow.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to me, like the runner on second rule, like that just doesn't feel like real baseball to me. Like you don't even need to get a hit to score. Like a couple productive outs, you score a run, then you go hold them, and the game's
Easier
over.
said than done, apparently.
Well, of course, yeah, but I don't know. Just to me, that's not like real baseball. Like you didn't earn that run, like in my opinion. So I guess I'll just say I'm cool either way. Whatever decision they make, I'll be fine with. Let's just hope, if they decide to keep the rule, let's just hope the Dodgers could be better next year.
Yeah.
I will say they've been better as of late. They've won their last couple in extra innings, but for the most part, they've been very bad in those situations this year, and it's cost them a lot of games. Like we're talking about how they're 2.5 back right now. Well,
Yeah.
if they weren't the worst extra inning team in the history of baseball, like they'd either be tied or in the lead. So yeah, I guess we'll see on that, but I guess I'm just kind of indifferent, whatever.
I'm doubling down. I want them to start adding more runners in like the 12th inning. Like just put a
Oh,
runner
wow.
on third, put a runner on third and second in the 12th inning. And then in the 14th inning, we're loading the bases and just keep going. Just keep going. My other joke last night was at some point, like in the 15th inning, you can send whoever you want up to the bat. It doesn't matter if the guy's still in the game, if he's been taken out of the game. Like you just send Justin Turner up and he strikes out. Justin Turner can stay up for the second out. That's my solution. Just get this thing over with as quickly as possible, which leads me to last night. Daniel, I don't know if this is a hot take or not. Last night's game was atrocious. I saw people tweeting, "This is why I love baseball. Baseball's amazing. It's so quirky." Last night was terrible. I enjoyed none of it. I was hate watching the entire thing. I was in my bed until 12:59 a.m., a 5-hour and 48-minute game, knowing the Dodgers had to play 17 hours later. It was miserable. Like, if it was like 2 runs scored, 2 runs scored, 3 runs scored, 3 runs scored, it would have been different. Like, these guys could not score a runner from second base for 5 innings. There were no hits. There were no hits by anybody for like 10 innings. It was miserable. I hated everything about last night until the Dodgers won.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess I just got to say, we texted about this, but hand up here. I honestly, I would not know how atrocious most or some of it was because I did fall asleep. I didn't make it through. I honestly, I was watching the whole game on my couch, and when we got to like the 12th or 13th inning, I was just so frustrated, like that the Dodgers couldn't bring in a damn run. And honestly, with this format, like, and maybe it's also part of like just how bad the Dodgers have been. Like
Yeah.
when you're the away team and you don't score,
Right.
like in
It's
my head, I
depressing.
just automatically assume like the game's over here. So after the Dodgers couldn't score for the fourth time or whatever in the 12th, 13th inning, I decided to go get in bed. I was like, I'll watch the game from here. It's probably going to be over in like a minute or two. And obviously, I fell asleep within like 2 minutes of getting in bed. I fell asleep. I will say though, I had the TV on, so like there were some moments where like Joe Davis got a little vocal, and it like kind of woke me up. Like one
Yeah.
was after Billy McKinney got a hit, and then I think it was Trey Turner right
Yep.
after got a hit too, and Joe Davis was like, the floodgates are open or something
Yeah.
like that.
2 runs.
That woke me up, and I woke up and I looked at the score, and I was like, all right, good, like they'll close it out now. I did not hear the Tatis home run. The next time I woke up was when Pollock was hitting the home run, and I was like, oh, this game's still not over.
No,
And then I
gosh.
finally like turned my head over and fell asleep for the final time and saw they won in the morning. So yeah, that was a crazy one. At least the Dodgers came out on top. I feel like we've
Yeah.
watched
Ugh.
that game a lot of times and they lose every time. So that was good. And for once, Dave Roberts was like the one doing the good
No,
managing.
totally.
Like the Padres were out of position players by like the ninth inning or whatever, and
Yep.
there was a bunch of times where the pitcher spot came up and the Dodgers would just intentionally walk the guy before him and just get out of the inning every time. So that it was nice to be on that end of it
Yeah.
for a change. And obviously the Dodgers, getting the win was huge there, and it led to the sweep and me being able to bring this old guy out. So yeah, just overall fun week. But that game, that was a crazy one. I
Yeah.
think I'm with you though, that it's never like I'd rather see action going on than just
Yeah.
guys getting out.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the big moment there was the Chris Taylor botching of the Tatis home run that just put it over the top. It's like, this game is so stupid. And then as soon as the Dodgers take the lead, of course, Corey Knebel comes in, who you trust. You're like, wow, the Dodgers actually still have a legit closer in their bullpen. They bring in Knebel. Tatis hits a ball that looks smashed. And then you realize Chris Taylor has a play on it. I'm convinced that ball is not going out if it doesn't touch Chris Taylor's glove first.
I saw the replay and it definitely looked like he like hit it out.
No,
Like it might have
totally.
been off the top of the wall if he didn't do that.
So brutal one there. Shout out to Brett Wood on Facebook saying he watched the game yesterday in Australia, caught the final 7 innings after work and before dinner. So I guess the key here
That
is
was
that
a normal game for you for once.
the people in Australia love 16 inning games. Just gives them something to
Yeah.
watch right before dinner.
Yeah.
Shout out to Brett Wood. That's hilarious. We also had somebody, I think, that was joining us from Canada tonight who is an hour ahead. So
Nice.
shout out to that person as well. But yes, I did have to give a shout out. I recorded a video today kind of sharing my thoughts, and Dave Roberts gets the MVP. He got the game ball from me last night. Because I mean, there were, people were joking, oh gosh, we're already getting playoff Dave Roberts. But yes, they never ran out of position players. They did use their last one, but they never got to a point where a pitcher had to hit. The Padres had that happen twice, and twice the Dodgers double intentionally walked to get to that player. Obviously, that's a controversial decision in and of itself, but it worked. Bickford got them both times. They kept intentionally walking to get to Caratini, and he couldn't do anything. So
Yeah.
it was like Cronenworth or Caratini started every inning at second base because one of those guys, either the pitcher or Caratini, seemed to make the last out of every inning. And again, it spoke to the Dodgers bullpen depth. I think when you say Vesia out there and you say, okay, I trust Vesia, I trust Bickford, I trust Gratterall. Brule was kind of the only guy where you're like, I don't know how this is going to go. He looked
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And Knebel was the one who messed it up. And then Shane Green, 1, 2, 3 innings. So the one other thing I was going to say is everybody talks about, I believe it was 1 out in the 5th until 1 out in the 15th. The Padres did not have a hit in between those two stretches. 0 for 29, I believe, over that stretch. The irony to me is that the only hit that broke that streak was a ball that you could argue should have been caught by Chris Taylor,
Right.
in which case that no-hit streak would have extended for another 5 outs. Obviously, it wouldn't have gotten that far because the game would have been over, but credit to the Dodgers bullpen because even the one, although it looked crushed off the bat, potentially could have been caught. Mookie Betts would have caught it is kind of the general theme that I saw on Twitter and social media afterwards. So, lots going on last night. I just will die on the hill of that was not a fun game to watch. I repeat, I was hate watching from the 10th inning on was just miserable. Because it's like, how many times do I have to watch the Dodgers fail? Like Hosmer would come up, make a productive out. It felt like every time, just slapping the ball. And Joe Davis, it's like, well, this guy's done this a lot. He's good at grounding the ball out to the right hand side, which is a great line, and it worked. And then I'd watch Bellinger come up, and I'm like, just bunt, Cody, please, just bunt the ball, just move the guy over, do something. Yeah. I can't watch you infield fly this. He did get a single in one of the at-bats. I think he had 2 hits. He was like tied for the most hits on the team.
2 for 7.
And that was the other joke, was that you had like Cody Bell, you had all the Dodgers found ways to get a single with the guy on second and not score. They had one.
Not score,
they had
right?
Will Smith had a single where they didn't even advance the guy. Like it was an infield single to shortstop in the hole that the guy catches. So they didn't even move the guy up. That was the joke. Is that then they had the 1 inning where Chris Taylor stole third. It was a double steal. It was like the Dodgers had two hits and a double steal and scored, in 2 runs or something like that. Like it felt like they should have had way more than they actually did. But anyways, all that to say, the Dodgers win last night. The Dodgers win tonight. They're 2.5 back of the Giants. They've got a 3-game set against the Rockies. Bullpen game scheduled for tomorrow. I think a lot of people wonder if Mitch White makes an appearance tomorrow. If he maybe gets added to the roster, I would imagine maybe a guy like Nunez comes off of, gets sort of designated for assignment, and Mitch White comes in to start. What do you think? Is that kind of what you would expect for tomorrow's game?
Probably, yeah. And I think they could just option Nunez so they wouldn't have to designate him.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But yeah, I think that would make sense, just because, even though the bullpen pretty much got a rest tonight, like they're still pretty taxed from that 16-inning game. And I think ideally, if you have a guy who could give you some bulk, you want to at least give him a chance. And obviously, what we saw from Mitch White his last time out was great stuff. So I definitely think he's earned, another chance. Whether it be as a starter or as a bulk reliever, like whatever. I don't really care what they do, but I think he's earned a chance to at least go out and try and give them some innings if he's able to. I think he pitched on Sunday, so I think he should be good for tomorrow.
Yeah, and I mean, his last 2 outings, I pointed this out, his last 2 outings, the 2 longest of his career. Obviously, the last one with over 7 innings in relief was amazing, but he pitched 4 innings, the outing before that, which was his career high prior to. David Price set to go for the Dodgers in Game 2 on Saturday, and then another TBD on Sunday for the Dodgers. On the Rockies side, all these games in Los Angeles, which is nice, 6-10 game tonight, so the Dodgers will get to sleep in their own beds tonight, you would imagine, and then a normal night game tomorrow. So that'll be good. Freeland, Gray, and Senzatella, the 3 for the Rockies, all 3 with ERAs over 4. John Gray would be the guy that you're like, oh, we have to face him. He's been terrible of late. On my fantasy squad, I think an ERA over 7 for his last 3 starts. So he's been dreadful. Andre Jackson, the other one, some people mentioning in the comments as a guy that potentially could make a start either tomorrow or on Sunday, I suppose. So that's a great point. I would imagine Mitch White gets one of those games and maybe Andre Jackson the other. And when I say gets those games, you're probably hopeful for 3 to 4 innings. We're not talking about expecting anything more from that. So anyways, we appreciate you all for joining us. That's Daniel Starkand. That's his broom. My name is Jeff Spiegel. This has been Dodger Heads presented by DodgerBlue.com. Check out Dodger Blue 1958 everywhere on social media. We say it every time. Please, 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 we'd much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell. As soon as we're done here, we'll probably have tons of content already up, post-game press conferences, that kind of thing. Tons of good stuff. I'm sure you'll get Max Scherzer, quotes from Scherzer, as well as quotes from Dave Roberts on his starting pitcher tonight, which should be good stuff. So, Daniel, we appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Monday, Daniel and I back recording our normal time for Dodger Heads, so be on the lookout for that. We appreciate you joining us. Dodgers sweep the Padres. They head to a 3-game set at home against the Rockies, hoping to catch the Giants. Enjoy the rest of your night. Dodgers win 4-0.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.